Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. Today, it is my honor and privilege to speak with Steven Hansen from FTI Consulting. Welcome, Steven.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Really looking forward to just kind of diving in and learning about your vantage point of all that's happening in the payments industry today. But before we get started, Steven, would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about who you are, your background in payments, and the work that you do at FTI Consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much, Donna. Very excited to be a part of this program. And I've seen a lot of other great, presenters on this program. So honored to be part of that cohort. But yeah, a little bit of background on me. I've spent a lot of my career working at the intersection of financial services, technology, and payments transformation. A lot of my work has been centered on helping institutions modernize their payments, think about how they move money, think about payment operations, payment infrastructure, core processing. And we've really seen a drastic evolution from some of the traditional payments to the constant change that we see today now, working a lot with digital assets and instant payments and some of the other rapid changing areas within the world of payments. I've always been drawn, into payments. I really feel like it's an area that's kind of the center of a lot of strategic questions, not only for large financial institutions, for payment processors, through some of the emerging payment types, and even down to individual merchants and corporates. So it spreads a lot of and covers a lot of ground. And, there are good questions that we help answer as consultants around customer experience, liquidity, risk, operations, competitive positioning, and how to actually think about payments as more less of a utility and more of a strategic function. And around FTI, kind of my focus is really helping clients in some of those segments that I talked about think through transformation, strategy, operations, some of the specific mandates like ISO 20022, payment platform modernizations, how they should think about digital assets and stablecoin, central bank digital currencies, and kind of bringing all of the various pieces that are required to operate a payments company, to operate within a large financial institution or bank or payment processor into one place. And so, we all know this is a very complex ecosystem, and really helping to guide those conversations and being able to bring all the pieces together is really what we are trying to do and differentiate with FTI.
That's wonderful. It almost sounds like a one-stop shop for all things payments.
We absolutely are, and we can help all the way from the beginning on the strategy through the implementation and testing and all those great things. So we're really building out an excellent team that can help deliver a lot of those payment capabilities.
That's wonderful. And such a needed service. There's so much happening. There's so much um, disruption and innovation in the industry. And, it's really, I think it would be really important for organizations that are, um, charting a new course to work with a seasoned professional who can guide them along the way, help them to implement best practices and avoid some of the pitfalls along the way, right? So really valuable service there. So thank you for what you do. Um, so we're here to talk about the industry and what's happening. And I like to start off by talking about the most notable trend from your perspective. What do you think the most notable trend in the payments industry is today?
Yeah, and it's really hard to just pin it to one trend, but I think it's the culmination of a bunch of trends that are coming together around things like instant payment rails, particularly in the U.S. market, as those have just become more widely available. Stable coin, agentic commerce, and really the theme that ties all of those things together is a shift from batch-based bulk processing of payments into real-time instant payment ecosystems with programmable money, right? And so when I think about what all that means and some of the other buzzwords that we include, stablecoin is now going to be competing, for cross-border transactions, much like the Fed is now looking into enabling, FedNow transactions internationally. Agentic commerce is going to set the stage, and there's now protocols that are out there to enable stablecoin transactions, card transactions, and some of these other things. So it really comes back to, I need to be able to make instant payments, and I need to be able to make my money programmable, and even not just programmable, but enable agentic commerce agents to make decisions on my behalf. So there's a lot going on, and it's rapidly moving. Obviously, with the passage of the Genius Act, that's really propelled the stablecoin conversation across the board, and I think created that fair level of competition between some of the traditional rails like the RTPs and the FedNows, with stablecoins and with some of the capabilities that come from a cross-border payment perspective as well. What I think we're seeing is really a fundamental breakdown of expectations and how people actually think about, a wire payment, an ACH payment, and some of the experiences that we have personally, and then large corporates are having as well, right? We expect immediacy. We expect that, we're going to be able to get answers from the companies that we interact with, and that we're going to be able to move money quickly, 24/7 by 365, and that payments are something that are more embedded in our lives. We have embedded finance, where we'd be able to interact with payments in a way that felt a lot different than probably the last generation writing a check, or something like that. So to me, the real trend is not just speed; it's kind of the design of the payment stack itself. The industry is moving towards money faster, that carries more data through rich ISO formats, and becomes more programmable. And this will have pretty significant implications on what payments look like in the next, I would say 5 years, but it may be moving even faster than that. There's also a lot of considerations around liquidity management, particularly for banks. Now that we're in a 24/7 environment, we were used to end of day settlement models. Now we're going to have to think about, how do we manage liquidity? Limits on a lot of instant payment rails are going up. How do we think about managing and using stablecoin settlement options? And then how do we think about things like fraud and resiliency in these worlds where we're having to respond in real time to the threats and the fraud that's going on in the background? So I think fundamentally, if I could kind of bunch it all up together, it's that real-time instant payment with all the hooks that brings along, from a programmability, from a enabling of agentic commerce, and from a kind of rapid money movement, and all the things that we then have to consider as part of implementing a resilient, compliant, and operationally sound payment system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those things you were talking about, a lot of these things are like, okay, yes, we want to do that. But then you have to figure out like the operational impact of that, like where the rubber meets the road. How do you actually make it a reality? And it sounds like that's really where you live and breathe is, bringing it into reality as to how it is going to actually function operationally within the organization. So
Absolutely. I think it's, definitely the operational components. And I think we're spending a lot of time right now also talking about the compliance components, and how you enable things like, for example, the OCC has opened up the ability to, get new bank charters, and a lot of fintechs are thinking about and looking at, how do I become a bank, which creates a really interesting conversation both for incumbents, large financial services. But once you overcome the compliance and the charter process, it's all about the operationalization, because you get a charter approved, or you're implementing a new system, or whatever it might be. If you don't have the operational, capacity, the first exam you're going to fail, or you're going to have operational risk events, or you're going to have a variety of things that happen. So nailing down the operational component, I think, is critical for any of these big strategic payments decisions that folks across the ecosystem are making.
Right, right. Well, so with all that's happening in the industry today, what would you say is the greatest opportunity?
Yeah, great question. I wish there was just one. I think it's viewing payments differently, right? So don't view payments as a commodity, as an infrastructure requirement, but view it as a strategic opportunity. For a long time, organizations needed payments to stay stable, efficient, be low cost. They were always, how do we do lowest cost routing? How do we, minimize our payment costs? But I think the organizations that continue to think about, not only the cost components, but how they can, build new products and services, how they can embed payments into their underlying products and services will definitely competitively differentiate themselves. Faster payments can improve liquidity management, working capital efficiency, customer experience, responsiveness. Richer payment data can create new opportunities around reconciliation, analytics, fraud management, and customer insight. ISO 20022 is a great example of that. I think we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg on what can be done, both on a corporate side, but also on a financial institution side, a large bank side, with all the new rich data that we have in the ISO world. And then, the emerging models like stablecoins are going to create new efficiencies around settlement, new ways to participate in value chains, and honestly, new ways to transact in US dollar or other stablecoin internationally, cross-border, and create a challenger to what cross-border payments will look like. Just, one way to think about it, kind of the organizations that win will not simply just process payments more cheaply, but they'll use payments to unlock better decisions, better experiences, and ultimately better economics. So I think that's really kind of how I think folks should think about it. Obviously, there's a lot of examples out there. I think we talked about kind of the ISO and stablecoin, the agentic commerce piece as well. The folks that figure out how to embed payments in the right agents at the right time will probably see disproportionate gains from being the embedded method of payment. That's still to be determined. But if I think about how I personally or professionally am using AI to make purchasing decisions, and ultimately enabling an AI to make a purchasing decision on my behalf, I think that's one of the critical examples of don't treat payments as a utility or a commodity. Treat it as something that's going to potentially greatly impact kind of your business revenue and bottom line.
Those are several opportunities, obviously, that we touched on. What would you say is the greatest challenge faced by organizations that process payments?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who lives in the payments world understands that, things are moving very rapidly. Sometimes we have shiny objects that we want to chase down, and those are awesome, and they get, a lot of excitement. And I think there are things now in the marketplace that are becoming more and more real, and the ability to adapt quickly enough to stay relevant while not making investments that don't ultimately have an ROI, but also being able to modernize in a way that's compliant, that creates a culture of risk management and an ability to kind of control the environment really is one of the biggest challenges. On one side, institutions know they need to evolve. I've done a lot of work with kind of core payment platform modernization, and almost everyone wants to replace some of the old legacy platforms that are out there. They know that there's probably a pretty good business case for it, but there's a very large hurdle to overcome in moving to new architecture, to moving off of legacy systems. And these are, outside of the core banking platform in banks, probably one of the platforms that needs to be the most stable, predictable, and up, all the time. So, I think a lot of banks are seeing the value in modernization, but they're thinking about it in a couple of different ways. And it's almost never a rip and replace. It's how do we incrementally add value, and how do we incrementally think about things like new payment rails? All right, let's move some of our volume onto FedNow. Let's think about stablecoin settlement. So it's a bolt-on kind of strategy and approach. But we all know, wire systems process an inordinate amount of volume every single day in the States, and then Swift and all the other like huge global infrastructure connectivity that is very embedded and part of the global economy in so many ways. So, it's just something that's so deeply embedded in the institutions that are there. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of fintechs that are now getting capabilities and are going to be, challengers. So it'll be interesting to see how some of the more established players, the large banks, the large payment processors react. I think we've already seen some of them kind of from an M&A market perspective buy up capabilities. They particularly just buy a capability to bolt on. I think we see, activity around doing, infrastructure investment to modernize, to be able to support things like 24/7 availability and real-time processing and all those other great things. But really, at the end of the day, you it's some of these things are very quickly going to become table stakes option, things for a lot of the banks and the bank's customers, and they're going to expect that these capabilities are there. And then I think one of the other things, just one of the themes that I continually run into, especially from, I guess, the people that I talk to in the industry who are like very forward thinking, right? Like, not what is payments going to be in a year or two, or how are we going to implement FedNow, but thinking down the road. And it's really the disintermediation theme, right? Who are the intermediaries in the payments marketplace where maybe it's not complete disintermediation, but maybe there's a niche area or a component of payments that could be better accomplished through fewer intermediaries. And what would that ultimately look like? And I think stablecoins is a great example of that, where we're having direct or exchange related transactions that are occurring. So I think there's, because of the fast moving nature, because of all the things that are coming down, not only from an operational and new payment capability perspective, being able to quickly adapt, being able to put in fraud monitoring and controls, and making sure AML requirements are up to date, and that you're not enabling payments that are going to, cause you a lot of pain and challenge in the future, are really going to be important. And then, like, again, these brand new things of agentic commerce, I think about, we do chargebacks and disputes on a card, and we're now enabling card payments through our AI agents. What does a dispute process look like? And how do we even get some of the really basic questions kind of resolved in these new worlds? And I think, Donna, you very aptly identified it, like those operational considerations and things we should be thinking about for something that's as simple as, an old method of payment that we're now enabling in a new way, and what are the implications? It's even some of those more simple things that we want to think about. So yeah.
Yeah, I often think about this, the fact that you know, new things, shiny things keep coming out rapidly, and of course they're here to stay, and so the industry has to embrace them. But all of the more traditional ways of making payments are still viable too. So you just have more and more and more that you have to support and have the operational capacity to make available. So it's getting more and more complex out there.
Absolutely. It really is. And I think the pace of change in the world, but also in the payments world, just increases at an increasing rate. So it staying ahead of that is really critical. And I think we didn't have a silver bullet to solve it all, but I think, building that flexibility into systems is really kind of the frontier and the way to think about it.
Yeah, I agree. So I am curious if you have any predictions about anything that could be going away. Like I know the government now is no longer paying with checks. Do you think that I don't know. I'm asking you. I know you don't have a crystal ball, nor do I, but I'm just wondering if eventually all things going digital and moving in the direction of real time, do you think uh, checks are eventually going to disappear, or not for a
We
long time?
we we have some good case studies to think about this. Places like Australia and others that are in the process of eliminating checks. We actually just recently did a very deep thought leadership piece, and would love the audience to find that and take a look. We did a deep dive with the American Bankers Association as well. But yeah, I mean, I think the Fed is, issued a request for responses across the industry to see what it would take to eliminate checks, how this impacts very specific niche industries like real estate industry, the insurance industry. Like there are some very specific use cases. We probably all experienced them personally, where all of a sudden is someone issuing me a check or I need to write a check for something. I think home contractors is a great example. So I think there's going to be some friction on making that happen. But as the government goes, so goes the industry. I think in a lot of ways, and purely from an efficiency perspective, we think about checks as being cheap because we write the check and we hand it over to someone, and we probably paid $20 for the book of checks. But for corporates, checks are very expensive. There's a lot of fraud with checks. They're expensive just to mail, the actual postage that goes out, all the things that revolve around checks and electronic transfers and lockboxes and all the things that are operational costs. And I think that we're getting to a place in the U.S. now that we have the infrastructure. We need to see more adoption of instant payment send on the networks. But that's also not stopping checks from going away necessarily. But I think as things like requests for payment become more ubiquitous, as we have other kind of options that are really easy to understand, like we've had Zelle and we've had Venmo and closed loop systems for a long time. I think that a lot of those payments on the consumer side could naturally go away from checks. And then the corporates, I think, have a very large incentive. Obviously, there are corporate treasurers who made their careers on the float on a check processing. But there's a lot of other benefits of having real-time liquidity management 24/7, knowing your positions, being able to sweep funds out in a way that makes sense. So it's one of those classic trade-offs. So just like you can be a little skeptical on stablecoin, I think it's very much become real. Is it going to replace checks today or tomorrow? Probably not. A lot of these things are very, very embedded in our economy and our financial systems. But I think there's got to be a time and a day where we don't have to write checks anymore or receive checks anymore. So
Yes, I would think so. Okay, so now I'm going to just ask you to provide us, based on your sum total of knowledge about all things in the industry, what is your silver bullet piece of advice for organizations that process payments?
yeah, absolutely. And I wish there was one silver bullet, but then I think myself and probably a lot of other folks wouldn't have careers. So I think it's really more of a principle, and it's like build for flexibility, not just a single like predicted outcome or predicted future. Payments are one of the faster evolving parts of services right now, and a lot of organizations are treating it as like a new development that they enter and embrace or they dismiss. We've talked a lot about what in the last probably 6 months, what are the trade-offs of adopting a stable coin versus not? Are you going to miss the boat? Is it going to be too late? Should you be a fast follower? But really, the reality is create a flexible approach, do proofs of concept, do things that are going to prove out what it is that you actually need from a payments. And if it picks up and it takes off, awesome. You have a new revenue stream, you have a new product, you have a new line of business, in some cases. But that flexibility comes at a cost as well. Like technology, like we talked about, a lot of the legacy infrastructure and architecture requires a pretty heavy lift. So you have to continually evolve that, think about new ways that you can create data architecture so you can leverage the richer payment data, so you can stay along with the standards, create very flexible operating models. I think that's something we're seeing at a lot of the large banks. I used to be an ACH person. That's all I did. Now I'm a payment operations person. I understand what, everything from an ACH payment to a stablecoin payment might look like and what it looks like from a settlement perspective. So I think, as some of these very fast moving payment capabilities are becoming more ubiquitous, having that flexibility is really going to be truly important. And same thing with agentic commerce. It could take off and be the next big thing very quickly. And it could be managing a large number of the transactions that we see, today on kind of an e-commerce world. And maybe not so much. Maybe there's more risk than folks are willing to tolerate in that space. But AI is not going away. AI makes all areas of our lives, especially on structured things that an agent can go research for you. What's the right color furniture that fits in my my office and doesn't have a style that I don't like. That's a question that it can answer a lot faster than you opening 20 tabs trying to find the exact right thing. So I say that just, it's kind of the possibility of the future, and being able to create that flexibility allows you to jump on the trends that are, building revenue, that are creating new products and creating better user experiences.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited to see where everything's heading. It's an exciting time to be a part of the payments industry, that's for sure. Now, Stephen, before I let you go, we're kind of wrapping up here, but I wanted to make sure that any of our audience, if they're, they understand they need to do some modernization of their legacy, um, platform, and they're looking to add some functionality to, to build it on, and they need somebody to help them navigate that whole process. How would they get in touch with you, or how could they learn more about FTI Consulting services?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. I'm always open to anyone who reaches out. I pretty much want to get back to a response, find out kind of what they've got going on. I spend a lot of time just talking to folks and understanding what their problems and issues are. So always feel free to reach out. FTIconsulting.com. If you Google my name and FTI, I'm the first profile that pops up. My name, email, and phone number are all available there. So happy to engage and would love to hear from this audience, as I know it's a good and diverse representation of the payments industry. And FTI Consulting overall, we are expert led. That is kind of our tagline for all things crisis and transformation. And we have a very broad offering of strategic, operational, compliance, risk, and regulatory. So, if there's anything in that space that looks interesting, or, how is FTI thinking about that? If I'm not the right person, we probably have an expert that can lean in and help. And like I said, we do pretty much all things payments end-to-end ecosystem. So that really is the best way to stay in touch, and would love to hear from anybody that's interested.
I just want to thank you, Stephen, so much for your time today, and for all your words of wisdom. And I also want to thank everybody for watching today.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.